There's 4 interesting midi hooking players here to go through in this video, so I think they deserve their own. We're going to kick it off with Sammy Verrills here. If you're not going to spend up on the top guns in Harry Grant or Damien Cook, these types of players, and there's some other options for sure, and we'll go through them here. Verrills there at 613k, averaging 42.9 last year. The big pros for him is that when he did play over 60 minutes, he got a 48 average. So that gives us about 5 points in value, which is great. And, he's coming off a few injuries in previous years. He finally is injury free, and I think there's a good chance that he can get this. Obviously, the big worry for him is the fact that he potentially might not get the 80 minutes. He's also in a poor team, so there's a couple of things there that could bring him down. That price is very awkward there at 613, but I really think that if there is no one on that bench and he gets that big minute role, he can provide a bit of value for you as a first or second guy, depending how you want to spend your money in other positions. And we will go through a video on how to sort of set up your team, the best places to put your money, the best places to pick the value guys, and so on there. Jackson Topney. So with the Dogs there, big question for him is, does he get some type of role? Averaged 42 last year and 600k price point there. The pros for him, the dual position hooker edge is obviously nice. You have the 46 average when he does play over 50 minutes. The main worry for him is that he's most likely going to be on the bench to kick off the year, but if there is an opportunity to play big minutes on an edge through the middle, whether it's in hooker, I think he can do really well, but that's obviously a lot of questions to answer at this point of the season. So I'd be leaving him to start, but he's definitely someone to keep your eye on and have in the black book. Cons there, probably doesn't get that spot. I just think he's someone to watch, really. Awkward price, though. You'd like him to come down a bit. If he does come off the bench to start off with, there's a good chance that he does come down in price to kick off the year. Aaron Clark is another one of those players I'm very interested in at 594k, averaging 41.5. Big pro for him is the fact that he has a 55 plus average in games at lock. So there's not much more to say. If he gets that lock position, you'd expect somewhere in that 50 to 60 range in terms of minutes, and he is someone that can fill in at hooker as well. Obviously, that is a little bit of a worry that he could move to the hooking position in games if there's an injury to Verrills. If maybe they look to play Verrills the 80 minutes and have Clark as backup. Potentially, that could be how they do it. Obviously, the cons for him, a little bit of a small sample size in those games at lock, but really, he's someone that's very, very interesting. He has a really nice PPM, and at 594k, if you can get somewhere close to that gun average from someone that is going to get dual position, if he gets named at lock, you'll have the hook and mid. I think he's going to be someone that you really look to put in your side. So have him on your watch list this preseason, guys. Check out where he's put in, which position he's put in the trials, and then obviously round 1 team list. But if he is named in that 13 role in round 1, we'll be speaking about him heavily, so you definitely won't miss out on that one. The next big guy to speak of is Brandon Smith, and he comes in with that dual position at the hook and the mid. 585k, averaged 37.2 last year, was really low. If you compare it to the year before, he played the majority of the season at 9 with Harry Grant out. Pros for him, obviously priced at 41, which is a little bit annoying, so he's up 4 on that. But he averages 52 when he gets over 50 minutes at hooker. So that gives you 11 points of value if you can get that. He is moving to a good team, which is great. So he goes from Storm being a great team to the Roosters also being a great team. So that is awesome. He has a spot all to himself now. We won't see him be getting 80 minutes, guys. Just be aware of that. He's not that type of player. Obviously, he has plenty of attacking stats. He goes really hard in defense. I wouldn't be expecting him to play those massive minutes, but he doesn't need to. As I said here, over 50 minutes a hooker, he does average the 52. So if he can get anywhere in the 50s, then he's obviously going to be worth it, that dual position. I see him in my side, come round 1. And I think a lot of you guys will also. So keep that in mind for Brandon Smith. As I said, plenty of interesting guys in this video here. Cons for him obviously can be a little bit inconsistent. It can be a little bit tough for your headspace. What I'm getting at there is that last year he had some really, really good games. Then he had games where he actually played decent minutes and he just didn't get the points. He'd hit a 20 odd. He can obviously be a little bit hot-headed, but we do love him. And a new team, he has some unknowns coming into that. The big news is obviously Connor Watson, who was probably going to spell him, is injured, which is not great. I love Connor Watson, but it does give Smithy some space to potentially play a few more minutes or really just thrive in that role. I imagine Watson is going to come in and take a few of those minutes, a few middle minutes as well. So there's a few on show there and a few up for grabs. Wade Egan, he's someone averaging 40.7, 582. He's obviously really safe in his spot. There's probably a couple of points of value, but I don't see much upside there for him. The cons, he just doesn't have a massive game. Doesn't have the attacking stats. You know, sometimes he'll get it. The tackles aren't anything special. He doesn't run the ball a lot. Solid player, but just not a keeper. So I'd be leaving him out of your side. Jacob Little at 571, the average of 40 there. In my hot takes, I mentioned I think he's going to score pretty well this year. It is his spot now. He has, hopefully, some big minutes, and that's what we got to look for. Are they going to have a specialist hooker on the bench to cover some minutes from him? Will he play 70? Will he play 50? There's, a fair bit to think of with him. But if you're looking at his pros, he averages 49 in games above 50 minutes, so that's nice. Yeah, he's priced at that 40 mark. That's 9 points of value if he can get anywhere near what he played like at the Tigers. You don't see too much of a difference there. He moves from the Tigers to the Dragons, where both teams aren't too great, so I don't think that changes much. The cons there, obviously just doesn't improve much there with the big minutes. So he averaged 54 in 70-plus minutes, but in those games over 50, averaged 49. So, yeah, that includes a lot of 50s and 60 games in there. So 5 points of extra value if he plays the big minutes. So either way, I think it's going to be fine, to be honest with you. And he didn't play a lot last year at all. So can he be durable in this league? We're yet to see that with Jacob Little. He's had a bunch of great games, a few stretches really good, but can he do it long term? Tommy Starling, so at 549, averaging 38.5. The pros for him, he has an amazing PPM, plenty of attacking flair, gets in with the tackles, he loves all that work. Cons, Ricky Stewart, that's all it is really. He just needs some big minutes, and if there's an injury to Zach Wolford, Starling will be in the majority of teams. All the great fantasy players will be picking him up really quickly. So yeah, not too much more to say on Starling. He'll be splitting that role with Wolford at the moment, which I'll speak about in the Hooker Cheapies video. But yeah, that's it for Starling. Wait till there's an injury, or if he gets that starting role and you know he's going to play big minutes. Wolford's not there. Joshy Hodgson, so he's another interesting one, which a few people have been asking questions about. Obviously, a massive average of 2 last year, 532k. He is a fair bit cheaper than previous years. You see those pros in 2021 there, he did average 50. It was a quicker game, so more tackles in there. But that's obviously really nice. When you're looking at his price point at around that 37 mark, there is definitely a little bit of value. But the main worry for him is that players coming off ACL injuries hasn't been really good for them in that first year. So thankfully for him and guys that are looking to pick him up, he did get injured in round 1 last year. So he's had plenty of off season and plenty of rehab time to get it right. Plenty of Ks in the legs, I'd imagine now. So he should be ready to go come round 1. But I wouldn't be expecting him to be playing that 80 minutes anytime in the early season. So that average of 50 is in 80-minute efforts. Just be aware of that, guys, that potentially you could hold off for a few weeks at the start. And if he comes out and he plays really well and he gets close to that average of 50 in the first sort of 5 to 6 weeks, then you can look to pick him up, I think, at some point. But there's plenty of other guys, plenty of value in the middies in a bunch of the sections, especially this one here. Silva Havili, 496k, average of 34.7. So the pros for him, really, they lose Mark Nichols, so maybe Havili could pick up a few of those minutes. And if he does, I think there's a little bit of value there. He averaged 41 in games over 40 minutes. So anywhere around that 45 minutes seems pretty fair for someone like Havili, who is really strong, at that nuggety sort of player that can do a great job with an awesome PPM there. So definitely some chance. And he has that dual, the hooker and the mids as well, which you could plug and play him in either. Cons, obviously, we're unsure of the role or the minutes at this point. So let's check out the trials. Let's check out that round 1 teams and see what we can gather from that, what information we can get and make our decision from there. And then we have Mr. Billy Walters. So he has that dual as well, 454 with the Broncos there, averaged 31.8. So very similar role last year. They did have Jake Turpin there. So without Jake there anymore, there is a little bit of an opportunity for Walters, but he's sharing that role with Corey Pakes, you'd imagine. So if Corey's not there and it's just Walters, then I think you got to get him in your side. But if they're both there, I think you can probably fade him and potentially don't get him. Probably gets the Broncos 9 or the 14. Either way, he's probably going to average about the same minutes as he would if he started like he did last year. He does have a 40-plus average at hooker in games over 50 minutes. So be aware of that. If he's the mainstay, if we know that he's going to be the main hooker, then he definitely has some value. 8 to 10 points potentially value there for Billy. But at this stage, we don't really know. He's sharing that role and he could potentially lose his spot at any stage. And the last one we need to talk about is Mitch Kenny. He actually has some interesting prospects this year at 426k, averaging to 25.9. last year, obviously in limited minutes, limited role for him, with Abdi Coruscant being the mainstay. But it's Mitch Kenny, it's going to be Sonny Luke now, who I'll speak about in the cheapies video. But the pros for Kenny is that he's a really good scorer when he gets over 50 minutes. Super consistent. You see him be able to average somewhere around that 40 mark if he gets the big minutes, right? Main issue here is he does have a 30 average in between that 40 to 60 minutes. So if he's not the main hooker, if he's not getting big minutes, then he does seem to struggle in that section there where he's just making tackles only, really, running the ball a tiny bit. So there's a little bit of a worry for him. He's at an awkward price at that 426k. They've upped him a little bit based on his potential this year. So he's sitting around that 28, 29. I'm not exactly sure, but you're looking at that 454. Take a couple of 13k, 26k. Should be a couple of points down around that 29 or so for Mitch Kenny. So he does need to score somewhere around that 37 to 40 to be worth it, because you will have to trade him out given he won't be a keeper. So if there's any injuries to Sonny Luke, Kenny will be your man for 80 minutes and he'll be a great mainstay in anyone's squad. So surprisingly, there's a lot of interesting prospects in this hooker midi section. Let me know your thoughts on the type of play you're going for. Are they going to be your main hooker? Are you going to go run with two of these guys? Are you going to run with a gun and a midi like a Brandon Smith? Let me know, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. Catch you in the next one.